Some Democratic governors are firing back at the president's threat to send in the military to quell the rioting that's going on amidst the protesting. Watch.
He does not have the ability to send troops in without being called on by the states to do it. I don't know any governor that's going to call on the federal government and federal troops to enter their state. We don't need that.
I'm fearful going to further fuel the animosity and angst and anxiety in this country. And I think it is more destructive than what I was hoping he would say.
White House Counselor Kellyanne Conway joins me now. Kellyanne, thank you for being on the program.
Thank you,
I want to start with something that happened just moments ago. Senator Schumer of New York says he wants the Senate to adopt a resolution condemning the president for last night's actions clearing Lafayette Square with tear gas ahead of the curfew that was supposed to be at 7 p.m. What's your response to what Schumer wants to see happen now?
Well, it's pretty amazing that the senior senator from New York won't look in his own backyard. You have Governor Cuomo just within the last hour criticizing the NYPD and the Mayor de Blasio, saying, quote, they didn't do their job last night. Everybody sees what happened to New York the last couple of nights. It's heartbreaking to see the most densely populated American city fall victim to violence and looting and rioting and not peaceful protesting necessarily. I would just say a couple of things, Harris. One is George Floyd, who was murdered in plain sight for all of us to see, and everybody should, as difficult it is, watch all 8 minutes and 49 seconds of that video. They should see that this man was murdered in cold blood for all to see, and that his family is calling for peace. They are calling for protest, but peace. They are saying, please don't destroy your cities and the rioting, the looting, et cetera. That's what's going on in Chuck Schumer's New York, and he's diverting attention, second-guessing what I suppose law enforcement decided to do based on what had happened the night before in Washington, D.C. in Lafayette Park, which was to expand the perimeter. I understand they expanded it from H Street to I Street. We had an iconic church set on fire. We had storefronts, restaurants that were just about to reopen, Harris, after almost 3 months of being closed because of the coronavirus, just about to open. They've invested money in new structures, in new social distancing policies to get their feet back on the ground at these restaurants and these mom and pop stores, only to have them destroyed. I walked around yesterday. I was driven, when I was on my way home, I saw people putting up plywood on their businesses. You see this all across the country, and nobody wants that. So Chuck Schumer needs to look no further than his own New York and give some help to that city.
You know, you mentioned that church, and there are other churches, too, that people are talking about today. They want to see them protected. The bishop of the Episcopal Diocese Church of Washington, which includes St. John's, where the president walked to yesterday, is actually, Kellyanne, going after the president's photo op, saying he used her church as a backdrop and the Bible as a prop. Let's watch, and then I want to see what you have to say after you see this.
The president just used a Bible, the most sacred text of the Judeo-Christian tradition, and one of the churches of my diocese, without permission, as a backdrop for a message antithetical to the teachings of Jesus. I am outraged.
Kellyanne, what do you say?
So how ironic, because just moments ago in the Oval Office, I was there, the president with the First Lady and the Vice President on either side of him signed an executive order furthering his policies with respect to religious liberty here in this great country and worldwide. That follows, Harris, on the president addressing the United Nations General Assembly last September on the matter of religious liberty, saying, please stop persecuting people based on their faith, that we will not support nations that do so. And this is a continuum by this president. 10 short days ago, 11 days ago, he said, reopen our places of worship. We need more prayer, not less. Stop treating them like they're non-essential. Stop discriminating against these places of worship that really compel a special solicitude before you ban people from worshiping. That followed closely with praying for the souls of George Floyd and the African-American police officer in Oakland who also lost his life. And then the president was over at St. John's today. We went to the St. John Paul II shrine where the president and the First Lady laid a wreath commemorating, I think, the 41st anniversary of of the former pontiff in Poland, and also his 100th birthday that just passed. And now, just moments later, an executive order on religious liberty. Why do I say all that? Because that is the best answer to the question you asked about the Episcopal minister. That is not, quote, her church. That is not, quote, her Bible. We don't look into other people's hearts and souls and discern and judge what their faith is, why the president felt compelled to walk there, why he held that Bible up. That is a symbol to everyone that we will not allow arsonists and anarchists who set that fire ablaze, who really, I think, demean the memory of those who have lost their lives in the name of their respective faiths and religions. We won't allow them to dissuade us from practicing our religion.
You know, I mentioned that was coming up on Outnumbered last hour, and so now that's confirmed. The president signing that executive order on religious liberty.
Yes.
We knew from taking his event live right here on Outnumbered Overtime, you know, at the Rose Garden, that he was moving toward doing something with regard, as churches were not allowed to open en masse across the country, as states were reopening, yet liquor stores and weed dispensaries were. So it was a big conversation.
And abortion clinics,
Kellyanne, before I let you go, the president, reports are that there's some talk behind the scenes there, or maybe it's more open than that, I don't know, about him potentially doing a primetime address to the American people. He spoke briefly yesterday. What is the latest on that?
That's always an option for the president, obviously. As I say, I was just in there. He can do that. He will continue to communicate with the American people. He does that through social media. He did it yesterday in the Rose Garden. He did it walking over to the church, and he will continue to do that. He also is, I just wanted to remind everybody too that last week the Department of Justice said that they've opened up a civil rights investigation into the death of George Floyd, and I think that we're all waiting to see the results of that investigation. The president will continue to speak. I have to say, Harris, that 12 years ago, March 18th, 2008, you had then candidate Barack Obama give a race speech in Philadelphia. Today, 12 years later, you had his Vice President Joe Biden go back and say that he is going to, quote, focus on institutional racism now. Hey, Joe, you've been here for 40 years in this city. What do you mean you're going to do it now? So I think we all need to come together and think about how to work through this as a nation, calling for unity.
Yes.
And that's most important here. And I think that is the message of some of these, of some of the folks out in the streets as well. Not those who are protesting in a way that is violent and hurtful to their own communities. And look at those small business owners. They work their entire lives to build these businesses, and now they're gone.
Absolutely.
In a blink of an eye. And we have to really stand with them too.
I'm going to step in. We'll have you back soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harris.
I appreciate your time
Be
and
well.
telling us what's ahead in the White House. You too.